It was April of 2020 when everything around us came to an abrupt halt. When all that's going on in the world, as we had always known it to be once, ceased to be, all at once. It was a dark time for the whole world, and it was certainly a bad time for me, too. After being let go from my job, with a crazy short notice, mind you, I found myself getting off from work with only a full week's worth of pay and nothing more in my name. And add on the fact that I also had nowhere to go anymore. But I digress. Let me first tell you how it all came to be. I moved out here to Boston for my work just recently. I was looking to get settled into the city for the foreseeable future, so I had spent the past few weeks looking for an appropriate place to live. It had taken quite a long time for me to choose a place for my residence, as I had to ponder all the pros and the cons. Just a week ago, I had come across a place that was well situated as well as suited to my taste. It was just what I had been looking for. I got into talks with the owner and soon put down a huge deposit for the place. It was going to take some time before the paperwork would go through, as well as the renovations to be done to the place, so I still had about a week's worth of time left before I could move in there. So, for the time being, I would be staying at a motel. And just as I had placed that big deposit down on the place, things started getting crazy on the news and social media. A pandemic had suddenly started taking over the whole world, forcing people to isolate and go under lockdown. Everyone was in a state of panic at the sudden threat not only to our lives, but also at our state of living. It was a huge turnaround from the life as we had always known it to be. And now, all of a sudden, I was also let go from my job. In fact, more accurately, at such a short notice, we were all told to go home and not to come to work for the foreseeable future. On the other hand, the city administration had started to take strict measures too. They were working on getting the people off the streets and back into their homes until further notice. Everything was a whole mess of huge proportions. As I was in the process of moving into my apartment, but still had time before I could officially move in, that wasn't an option for now. So I made my way back to the motel that I had been staying at for some time now. On my way there, all I could see was panicking residents storming the stores and malls and hoarding up on stuff that they deemed important, and the authorities rounding people up and trying to maintain order in the city while doing so. When I came back to the motel, I went straight to my room, only to find the door to my room was locked shut, and my key doing absolutely nothing to open it. That was puzzling for me, to say the least. For the last 2 weeks that I had been staying there, that had never happened before. So, I was rightfully stumped at finding myself unable to access a room that I'd already been paying for, in advance for the whole next week, too, mind you. So, I walked over to the front desk looking for the clerk to try and find out what exactly was going on, as I still had a week left on my room. Hey man, I couldn't get the door open with this key. Is there a reason my door is locked all of a sudden? I was trying to reason out the sudden change, thinking that maybe they were just taking some extra precautions in the face of all the recent happenings. I was proven wrong, however, when the clerk opened his mouth next to answer my query. Maybe you should keep up with paying your bills and maybe you won't get locked out of your room, came the snarky reply, which did not make any sense, as I was sure that I had not only cleared the bills from the past stay, but I was also good to go for the next week. So I tried to explain that to the man. Hey man, I just paid you the 2 weeks rent of that room last week. I still have a week before I have to pay you any more money. The clerk looked at me at that, with a little smirk playing on his face as he reached over and grabbed the phone. He started dialing who I assumed would be the owner of the motel, and I was proven right when the call finally went through. Hey Larry, I got a tenant down here wanting to get back in his room. His tone seemed very non-serious and oddly mocking, as if he was not interested in actually resolving the issue or something, but instead was just making fun of my situation. Now that really rubbed me wrong. I did not want to make a commotion or anything and start a possible fight as a result, so I just kept quiet and did not say anything about it. Besides, with all the things going on with this pandemic and the lockdown, I was far more fixed on getting back into my room and sorting things out. I had absolutely no energy to involve any of this other stuff, so I just resigned myself to just wait quietly for the person in charge to come. 5 minutes later, a fat guy walks into the motel, pistol tucked in front of his pants, puffing on a cigar. As soon as he was within hearing range, he actually started spitting up garbage.
"Look here, you bum. I got all your stuff packed up in this box, so get out of here before I hurt you real bad, kid."
He made an aggressive conversational opening, but I wasn't about to go down just like that. So I argued right back. "Look, man, I paid you the money already, and I don't owe you anything at all." It did not go well with him. The guy behind the counter picked up a cardboard box from the floor and almost threw it at me, all while the guy with the gun pulled out his pistol and aimed it at me. He practically bellowed at me then.
"I want you to grab your crap and get out of here, or I'm gonna pop you and empty this clip,"
he roared, the nozzle of the gun mere inches away from my face. And I did go down, just like that. I scrambled to grab the box and hurriedly walked down to the motel. But even then, I had to at least try something else in a last-ditch sort of attempt. I turned around the nearest corner in an effort to put some distance between myself and that man with the gun and pulled out my phone. Then I called 911. That didn't go well either. After all the things that I had been through throughout the day, I got an answering machine to my call, saying that it would be well over a 2-hour waiting time or suggesting me to call back later another time. I almost screamed in frustration at that and hung up the call. It was not worth waiting on a call for more than 2 hours. I put down the box on the ground and followed suit myself, too. I just sat down and started thinking about what I could possibly do next. Or, more pressingly, where could I go for the time being? I did not have many options to explore and choose from. I had just moved here a few months ago and I really didn't know anyone out here. Definitely no one whose place I could just crash at during an emergency lockdown. I had some acquaintances and some co-workers, but they were out of the question. So I would have to book another hotel or motel for the time being. That raised another issue in itself. I was very short on cash. I ran over to the corner market to cash my check since it was already after 7 p.m. with no banks that would be open at the time. I had $2,700 to my name, so I withdrew that and looked up every hotel in a 5-mile radius from me, only to find that almost all of them were fully booked. The few that I came across that still had a room soon also became out of the question because, as the city was close to a full lockdown, most of them had raised their prices due to the pandemic that was going on, to astronomical levels. I would not be able to afford them for long, especially considering that I was now potentially jobless for the foreseeable future. So I decided to do the next most reasonable thing that came to my mind, catch a cab out of the city until I could think of something better. But I saw nothing but traffic on the roads leading outside the city. There were chances that it could take me several hours just to get outside the city, and I wasn't really sure if the cabs would even take such a risk in these tough times. So that option also went out the window when I did finally get a cab and spent half an hour stuck in the same spot. I paid the driver and jumped out of the cab to catch the train to the next station instead. The trains weren't that busy. In fact, it was almost empty with just a few people scattered on it. There were around a dozen people in my compartment and almost all of them were busy on their phones, looking for updates on the pandemic situation, I assumed, since I was doing the same thing. It was almost 5 minutes into the drive when I noticed 3 guys in a neighboring car get up and begin walking towards ours. By just their walk alone and the way they were carrying themselves, I could immediately tell that they were not really going to be good news. And this was proven true when they started making a big scene as soon as they entered our car. One of the men grabbed onto a lady who was just sitting across from me. One by one, they all started harassing the poor lady. She was clearly uncomfortable with their advances. I could tell. Everyone could tell, in fact. They just chose not to pay it any heed. But nobody on the train said anything as the men continued their harassment of the woman. Everyone just tried to look away as if nothing out of the norm was happening. I waited for the lady to rebuke them, and maybe they would wake everyone up to the obvious elephant in the room. But that too never came to be. The woman, no matter how visibly uncomfortable and creeped out she felt or looked, did not scream or shout at the guys, or even hit them in retaliation. She must be really afraid of their retaliation, fearing that they may get even more physical with her in anger, I thought. I should help her out. I walked over and smacked the guy's hand as he tried to wave it away from the lady. "Hey, why don't you find someone else to bother, you jerk?" I screamed at him.
Who the hell do you think you are, idiot?
He shouted right back at me.
"I should break your head open,"
came someone else's shout. One of the guys grabbed me by my shirt, and before I could make sense of exactly what was happening, he punched me in the face. It all happened so fast that I didn't even have time to duck and avoid the straight hit, so it caught me right in the nose, and I fell backwards into the wall. Talk about a punch. Whew, I got rocked hard from that hit.
"Damn, dude, you got a two-piece without the biscuit."
They didn't even give me enough time to catch my bearings and get back up before coming on strong once again. One of them kicked me, and unfortunately, or fortunately, it landed right in my ribs. I let out a hiss of pain. Another kick followed that, and then another. I was fully down on the floor by the end, and one of them took advantage of my position and pinned my legs down by actually standing on one of my shins. By then, I was hoping that someone else from the train would intervene and stop all that. Surely some other brave soul would have been there willing to help me. And there were a dozen people there, and if they had banded together, they could have easily overpowered the assailants. But it seemed that no one had bothered to step in and help me, just as no one had done so when they were messing with the lady. After a complete physical annihilation, they went on towards the financial attacks. Both of them ripped open my jacket, looking through the pockets and discovering the cash that I had just withdrawn like an hour ago. One of them looked over to my box and proceeded to look that around too. So they took my box as well as the money from my pocket and went back on their merry way, while I was left lying there on the train compartment floor. Everyone on the train watched them rob me of everything and did nothing about it. Forget the bystanders. Even the woman that I was trying to help and was being targeted for did nothing to come to my aid or defuse the situation. She completely avoided eye contact when I accidentally looked her in the eyes while trying to sit up. Everyone did. All of them pretended that they had not seen anything happen there. I might as well have just been invisible to them. I moved to get up, only to feel the tickle of blood run from my nose, indicating a ruptured capillary or two. Oh well, one more thing to add on to the long list of my grievances for the day, I thought rather morbidly. So I was stripped of all my money and belongings, and I still had nowhere to go, and to top it all off, all my pride had been ripped from me as well. And I was left with some bruises and injuries, along with a bloody nose and a wounded ego. All because I tried to be a hero when everyone else stayed silent. Or more like all because I was unfairly kicked out of the place I had fully paid for. None of this would have happened if the bloody motel owner hadn't kicked me out when there wasn't any reason. I would have safely been in my bed, probably already trying to sleep by now, instead of nursing my hurt body and my aggrieved pride if those greedy morons hadn't threatened me with that pistol. The more I thought about it, the more angry I got. All my frustration about the whole day and all my helplessness about the situation, and now all my humiliation at the hands of these thugs and thieves was slowly turning into anger. Anger at those men who I swore I was going to get even with. I was going to get my money from them at the very least, especially now that I did not have anything else left on me. No money and no possessions whatsoever. I noticed a baseball bat lying there on the floor, and I grabbed it as I stood up, wiping the blood from my nose. Leaning on the door of the compartment, I waited for the next stop. By the time I got out of the train at the next stop, it was already past 9 p.m. I couldn't even buy my way back to the motel because I had no money to do so. So I had to resort to the good old walking method to reach my destination. The streets were clear and there weren't even any cars on the road anymore. Only a few people were walking by, trying to make their way back home, and I would have blended right in if only I wasn't limping slightly. It took me around 2 hours to get back to the motel. The good thing was, I was feeling significantly better by the time I was there. I walked up to the motel looking at the last car pulling out from the parking lot. I saw the clerk at the front desk busy on the phone, talking rather loudly. I walked over to him and bussed the bat across the back of his leg. It made a very disturbing crunching sound as the clerk screamed in pain and dropped the phone.
Ah! What the hell are you doing back here? Why did you hit me, you little prick?
He inquired. I aimed the bat at him once again, not giving him any time to recover and make any other plans, demanding for him to give me the money out of the cash register. Get on the phone and call your buddy down here right now, or I'm gonna bust you up some more! I roared at him, and he rushed to comply as I landed another hit against his shin. I made him give me his wallet and keys too, just before I saw his friend coming down the stairway, cussing and shouting. As soon as he walked in, I hit him across his back with the bat and took his gun from him. I want both of you to strip down and kick your clothes over to me, or I'll pop hot metal into both of you! I bellowed, and they quickly obeyed, not wanting another hit. As soon as I collected the money that rightfully belonged to me and had their pistol shoved into the back of my shirt, I ran out of the motel. One of them ran after me, fully naked as the day he was born and bearing everything to the world, screaming at me.
Bring your butt back here with my pistol, you damn thief!
Everyone ran out of their rooms, laughing as the clerk was seen leaning against the wall, only holding a book to cover his junk.
Everyone get back in your rooms! There's nothing to see here!